Hello and welcome to the latest edition of NDTV World. As we've been reporting, in a big relief to Wikileaks founder Julian Assange, in a deal that he has signed, he's set to be freed, and in exchange for a plea deal, he'll be pleading guilty to one of the charges in a U.S. court in the offshore U.S. territory of Mariana Islands. We have with us Alexa O'Brien, who is a legal researcher, an analyst, and a writer concentrating on espionage cases. Welcome to our show, Alexa.
Thanks for having me.
I'll start off by asking a really basic question. Was this expected that he will be freed in such a manner?
I'm going to say no. This particular case is unprecedented in a lot of different ways, from however you look at it. So, in a certain sense, it's sort of breaking new ground. So while there had been some commentators who noted that this should have happened years ago, it's a surprise to people.
Okay. So any details on when this deal was signed, this plea deal that we are all talking about?
Yeah, so this has been in the works for a while. There's been Australian lobbying of the Biden administration. Within the U.S. sort of national security, establishment, there are differing views on how to handle Assange. If I might just say, Assange is pleading to one count that is very different from the 17-count superseding indictment that came down in 2020. The 2020 superseding indictment was a conspiracy to hack and distribute. And it had several counts that dealt with publication narrowly tailored to the names of U.S. intelligence sources. And so there were press advocates who were worried about, how the government was going to distinguish what they were charging Assange with versus the behaviors of any, media practitioner. So what he's pleading to is a felony count for acquiring and disseminating. So it's a markedly different, count than and criminal theory than what he actually was charged with. And, this has been a sort of a geopolitical issue because, for example, when Assange was in the embassy, he had possession reportedly from his own, his public statements for CIA hacking tools. And, in cyber war, there really is a hard discrimination between reconnaissance and anything further than that. So it created a geopolitical situation. So, parties have been lobbying in various ways to try to remedy this and put it to rest.
Okay. So talking about Mariana Islands, as I mentioned earlier, it's an offshore U.S. territory, U.S. Commonwealth to be precise. Could you tell us why this, final sentencing will be held in that place?
Well, he's already reportedly on his way to Australia. So he's had his hearing, and it's the furthest, U.S. district court that's closest to Australia. And, reportedly it was at the request of, Australian diplomatic stakeholders. I think also that, one can make a tenable inference as this story is developing, that there are issues related to both national security and mutual legal assistance and extradition treaties that impact where, Assange was going to fly over or where he might stop, which might complicate the matter. So they got him to essentially out of, any chance of contiguous United States or Hawaii to a place that's closest to Australia.
And talking about Australia, which is his native country, what kind of reactions are you expecting when he lands in Australia? Talking about the political parties there, they've already started making some statements, particularly the opposition in Australia. So what kind of support does he enjoy in Australia?
So Assange has a lot of support from, the Greens, for example. They've been a long-term supporter of Assange. I think that we have to remember that, Australia was a coalition partner, and the material that Assange is pled guilty to acquiring and disclosing had to do with, basically military related activities for Australia, the UK, the US, etc., as allies. And so one should be, clear that this isn't just a sort of a United States kind of thing. I mean, the United States has definitely prosecuted him and been the most adamant about it as a deterrent for this kind of event. But, Australia and the UK are very much party to the national security concern for these leaks.
Okay. Now that we've talked about the details of the cases and the plea deal, what about his personal life, which was affected heavily due to this case? His wife has come out and given a statement thanking supporters profusely on the social media X. So, could you shed some light on the difficulties that he faced while he was in the UK in prison?
Well, I mean, I think, I can't actually speak to his personal life. I think that, a lot of parties, Manning, Assange, former supporters, former journalists have all been impacted by this in various ways. So Assange is not the only, aggrieved party, so to speak. I mean, when you have a news outlet that is, Ted Koppel years ago testified to the U.S. Congress that the CIA shouldn't use journalists to cover because it put other journalists at risk. There may be legal concerns that are, of course, need to be, defer to the First Amendment or take a greater sensitivity to public life and people's personal private rights. But we shouldn't forget that there are ethical duties that journalists and media practitioners have. And when a media organization says it's a librarian / spy master / it starts to conflate those ethical boundaries. And I think that you can also make the case that international law is threatened by the kinds of behaviors of Julian Assange as much as he claims that it is also threatened by his prosecution. So there's a lot of different arguments and ways to look at this situation.
Okay. To close off, I'll ask you the argument that the US government had been making for a while, that the leaks promoted by WikiLeaks, they endangered the lives of several US authorities overseas. So is the US ready to drop that specific kind of charge? Has it already dropped that specific charge against Julian Assange?
So it didn't drop it. It's just they came to an agreement, which is much about the sort of legal process as it is about geopolitics. And you have to remember, anytime the US government has to go into a court and reveal classified information, especially as it relates to potential harm to individuals, including its sources, I should just specify, these are foreign intelligence sources. They're not human sources, so to speak. But there probably was some crossover in the State Department cables. He will not be prosecuted, because of double jeopardy. Like, he's not going to be prosecuted by the U.S. government for this again. So I think that the parties just reached an agreement to sort of put this to rest, and they all got a little bit of it.
Thanks a lot, Alexa, for joining and shedding light on